Welcome to the very first HubSpot User Group for 2025. My name is Trav and I'm here today with Sophie talking all things attribution, which is a bit of a black art for those that don't know what it is and how it can be used within the organization. But today we're really going to uncover how to use attribution reporting inside your HubSpot account and basically step you through to a few screen shares and throw some stuff up on the screen just to give you guys some clarity in regards to how to use the reporting, but also what types of attribution reporting are best used for your specific situation. Now, to kick things off, if you're watching this live on the left or right hand side, I should work this out because it's going to be the same every single time. On the left hand, but either side, there's going to be a chat box. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want if you are watching live. If you are watching the recording of this, just below in the comments area, feel free to leave any questions that you might have. Feel free to comment on my stuff ups, all of that stuff underneath as well. And we usually get back to you within 24 hours with that as well. So the HubSpot User Group, for those that have never watched this before, is basically a free resource for anybody out there that uses HubSpot that are able to talk about such topics to help give you guys more insight into using HubSpot better. So if there's a topic that you are looking to want to cover, feel free to leave that in the comments as well. But yeah, we're always up for new content and ideas as well, so feel free to reach out. So today we're here with Sophie Costello. She's the strategist here at Neighborhood, and I would say you're the only person here that loves reporting. Or do you love it, or just does everyone get you to do it?
No, I actually enjoy it. Probably like one of 3 people in the world who actually like it.
Yeah. And I think Sophie, just for context, works on some really complex projects here at Neighborhood. So she's dealt with really simple and really complex reporting types. So again, if you've got reporting questions, feel free to write them anywhere you can see on the screen. But today specifically, we're going to sort of step through attribution reporting, and I think that's really important for a number of reasons in understanding what actions are resulting in specific outcomes, not closing of deals specifically, but and I think there can be some confusion when it comes to getting started with the tool. It can be a little bit overwhelming in my opinion. I'm one of the people that don't like reporting. I like to get the reporting, I just don't like setting up the reporting. So I think some people can get fairly overwhelmed with it and sort of almost just walk away from the reporting tool. So today I really wanted to sort of dive into, I guess, the attribution reporting tool. We'll step through each of the attribution model types. I think we'll step through each of those in best use scenarios and use cases, but we'll also maybe share our screen too and step through some scenarios to help give you guys some context in regards to why we would recommend certain model types for certain scenarios. I will preface this because we did say this prior. Attribution reporting is definitely, I guess, it needs to be on a specific use case, and it's not going to be a one size fits all for every business type. So please use this as a source of inspiration, not just copy exactly what we do today, because it might not be exactly what you need. But we are always here to help out and answer those questions for you as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a big disclaimer.
Yeah, there's really not like a right and wrong way to do it. It's really just based on kind of what you're trying to solve for, what you're trying to report on. And you might use a mix of different attribution report types and different attribution models as well. You don't have to kind of stick with one. You can use different ones for kind of the different things that you're trying to look at as well. So I think it's important to know that playing around with it probably is the best way to learn about that, and just give it a go and try the different types really and see how it works for you.
Yeah.
Would be my suggestion probably.
I've got a really good rule of thumb is that when you're going in to build a report, go in there with the outcome. Because I think that if you kind of want to go in there and play with the tool, you'll go in there and 45 to an hour will pass and you don't know what you're building, and you might get some context into where things might be. But I always say it's always really good to go into that with a purpose.
Yeah, it's like a science experiment. You should try and have like a hypothesis or something that you're trying to prove or disprove, or just some kind of question that you're trying to answer, and that'll make it a lot easier to figure out what you should be looking at, and it will help you sort of contextualize the data as well. So rather than just looking at them as data points, you're looking at them as answers to a question or parts of a question that will help lead you to an answer. So it makes it more interesting to build the reports, and it also makes it easier to understand how those things connect, rather than saying, I want this many contacts created and from these sources, or like just looking at that kind of more abstractly. If you're looking at it from a perspective of where are my sources coming from, or how many leads that came through from paid ads actually converted, that kind of thing, it'll help you actually look at the data a lot easier, I think.
So I think let's start on why somebody would do attribution reporting. I think I've got a few points here, as well as I think that one, it can kind of connect the marketing efforts into like the real business outcomes. That's probably one. Yep. Understanding the customer journey to identify which touch points might drive those specific conversions as deals or sales specifically. Justification from ROI and marketing spend. I think that's a pretty good one. Yeah, it's huge. And also, I think actionable insights to focus on what's working and not working within the organization. And we're talking about the customer experience from when someone first discovers your business online, in person, trade show, whatever that might look like, all the way through to purchasing your product or service as well. So is there anything you'd probably add to any of that?
I think that pretty much covers it. I think the main reasons people would generally be looking at attribution reporting is because they are trying to prove ROI, or at least kind of show that there is some kind of ROI on their efforts. It can also be helpful to see kind of further points than that, not just like ROI, but also like see how that's changing over time, or seeing how the customer journey looks as well, because you can see sort of where they're going from their first touch through to like when they convert or when a deal is created and that kind of thing. So there's a few different reasons that you would look at attribution reporting, but mostly in service of seeing how your activities are kind of impacting your business goals or business activities. So
let's talk about the attribution reporting type. So just a bit of a caveat there. So for contact attribution reporting, pro subscriptions will work out well. For those that are looking for deal and revenue subscription, hopefully this is on the screen right now, we need Marketing Hub Enterprise. So if you do not have Marketing Hub Enterprise and you would like to trial this, reach out to us and we can get your account ungated and trial for a trial period, just so you can start playing with those model types and go from there. That was a disclaimer. There you go. So let's get stuck into the three different attribution types. We've got the contact attribution reporting, the deal attribution reporting, and the revenue attribution reporting. Did you want to chat through each of those individually about what that means for that specific object?
Yeah. So contact create attribution reports, pretty much what it says on the tin. So you're looking at how contacts are being created in your portal. As long as you have the tracking code installed on your website or kind of whatever you're using really there, you should be able to see their whole journey, not just from when they submitted a form or they came into your portal at that second, but also their activities before that. So contact create attribution reports, it's a bit of a mouthful, are really helpful to see what's leading contacts to convert, like what got them to that stage where they were willing to submit a form. Was it paid ads? How'd they get to your website? What pages were they visiting? That kind of thing. And then just generally like how contacts are entering your CRM, because you might have a lot that are coming through from direct emails or the email inbox integration, or if you're importing them, you can kind of see that comparatively against all of the other sources as well. So that's great for things like seeing kind of general awareness of your brand, or seeing how they're kind of first hearing about you and first visiting you. Deal create attribution reports, again, kind of what it sounds like. It's what is influencing the actual deal creation activity. So did they attend, say, a webinar? Did they see certain pages on their website? Did they get a certain email with a particular deal or coupon code or something like that? What's kind of driving the deal creation and sales activity there? And then revenue attribution reporting, that's looking at the actual revenue in HubSpot. So as long as you're tracking amounts and some kind of money in your portal, you'll be able to report on that. It's good for things like identifying the activities that are leading to your kind of higher value deals. It's good for things like seeing what deals are being closed as well. So you can see sort of the closed won amounts versus the closed lost amounts. And you can, I would say for most businesses, you probably want to use a mix of these reports. So you might want to see what's being, kind of what's creating deals, and then also later what's leading to revenue being generated as well. So they each kind of have their own purpose, but they are separate reports. So you have to sort of look at them individually.
Nice. And we'll show some examples of what that would look like as well with the share screen. Now, when you go into each of these type of reports, there are some different sort of attribution modeling types. We're going to step through some of those modeling types, and we'll put some stuff on the screen just to help give you guys some context in regards to what we're talking about. HubSpot also does have what those attribution modeling types looks like in the reporting tool. Again, it's probably on the screen. I'm ad-libbing because there's clearly something in it there at the moment, but if there's any sort of questions as we step through this attribution modeling, please feel free to reach out in the comments or the chat as well. So there are a number of different modeling types, and I think we're going to step through, the model of what it looks like. We'll give you a bit of a brief rundown of the explanation of what that model looks like. We'll give some context into what that looks like from a contact, a deal, and a revenue aspect too. And we might give some scenarios in which that model could be best used for as well, and anything in between. And if there's any experience that you've got, you building these as well, we can bring that in there as well. All right, well, let's get stuck into the attribution model types. And Soph, take this exciting topic away.
Thrilling topic. Sure, everyone is really excited to hear about each attribution model. It's a very dry topic, so I'm sorry for that.
It is what it is.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can really do to make this exciting, but it's good to know the difference, because I think this is also, if you go into attribution reports in HubSpot, it's the attribution models that probably makes everyone just close that tab, I think. That's the thing that you look at it and you go, no idea, and you kind of immediately exit.
Also, if we're really dry, if you're watching the recording, there are chapters, so feel free to move to the part where you want. There you go.
Yeah,
we'll try to make it as exciting as possible.
I think that will be helpful. So first up is the first touch attribution. This is probably the easiest one to explain. Basically, all credit for everything about, say, the contact being created will be attributed to the very first touch that they had with your company. So the very first page that they visited, or the very first ad that they looked at or clicked, more accurately. So first interaction, basically. There's also last interaction, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the opposite of that. So all of the attribution will go to the very final touch point before they converted or before the deal was created. So depending on what you're looking at, first interaction can be helpful to see, particularly if you're running awareness campaigns, if your brand isn't super well known yet, or if it's something that, it's not a household name, for instance. First interaction can be great to see, where did they first hear about you? Was it an ad? Was it a social post? Last interaction can be good to see where they actually converted. So they may have seen an ad or watched one of your webinars, done something ages ago, and it's taken them weeks, and now they've finally actually converted, they've submitted a form, and that last interaction, the bit where their contact record was actually created in HubSpot, that's the last touch. So those are the two kind of basic, I would say most simple ones to understand, because 100% of the attribution goes to either the first or the last. Everything gets a little bit more complicated from here, unfortunately. So the next one I'll go through is J-shaped. And if you think of literally the letter J, what that does is...
Should be on the screen.
Yeah, hopefully an indication of what the letter J is will be on the screen. With the J-shaped attribution model, 20% of the credit goes to the first interaction. So that's kind of the little bit of the J. And then 60% of the attribution goes to the last touch, or the last bit that happened before the deal was created or the contact was created. And then everything in between gets shared evenly. So the remaining 20% is shared evenly between everything else that happened between when they first hit your website or first interacted and the contact, for instance, was created. This is good for kind of longer sales cycles where you want to be able to see everything across the whole kind of process, I suppose, but
journey,
you do, across the journey.
Yeah.
But you want to kind of prioritize the last touch because that might be more important to you if that's the actual conversion event. There's also the opposite of this, which is called an inverse J-shaped, which is literally if you just flip that around, so that 60% of the credit goes to the first touch interaction, 20% goes to the contact create action or the deal create action, and the remaining 20% is then split across them. And this can be good, similar to how I mentioned for first touch campaigns, good for sort of awareness campaigns where you do want to see what that very first touch was, because often that's sort of the most important thing. But then you also want to see what influenced them along, because they might have had interactions at several points if you've got a longer sales cycle. So it can be more helpful for sort of more complex sales cycles than just that first or last touch. After that, there's U-shaped. And most of these are letters. I actually don't know why, but U-shaped, if you think of a U, for that, 40% of the credit goes to the first interaction, 40% goes to the last interaction, and then the remaining 20% is kind of split through the middle. So rather than prioritizing first or last, it's kind of even there. But you're getting sort of those two key kind of milestone events of the first and last being kind of higher priority than everything else that happens in between.
I think for us here at Neighborhood, that model would make a lot of sense for us because we want to understand how somebody has come to learn about us, but secondly as well, what led for them to book a meeting with us to start working with us as well. Yep. So that, I think, like, just to give some context, would make a lot of sense for a service-based industry like ours, because understanding where they found us from, but also what specifically converted them, and from a 80% perspective, I think would give me better context, and then 20% in the middle would just sort of understanding about what content have they sort of touched on.
Yeah, well, what have they engaged with?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does make more sense for a business like ours or any business that is also looking at sort of contacts that come in more prioritized, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're looking at like deal creation and things, I probably wouldn't recommend the J-shaped or either of the first or last touch models as much. And U-shaped can be good in that instance, but I think the next one I'm going to discuss might actually be more helpful for that. So it does also depend on what you're reporting on, because you can use any of these attribution models with any of the three reports that we discussed initially as well. So contact creation, deal creation, or revenue attribution as well. So the next one I'll mention is time decay. And basically what that does is it takes, it prioritizes the more recent activities, and it gives less and less attribution the longer it takes for a deal to be created or a deal to close, for instance. So a higher percentage of the credit goes to the most recent actions, and then it decays over time. This is really helpful, I think, particularly for probably like revenue attribution, once the deal has actually been created, like when you're looking at what's kind of leading to your high value deals closing, or kind of what that journey looks like, especially if it's kind of a longer sales process where you are expecting them to have kind of more interaction with your sales team, or maybe they are also doing quite a bit of education themselves as they're going through the sales process, rather than say a more sort of straightforward, pretty quick sales cycle where they see something and then they buy it. I think time decay is more helpful for those longer term sales processes where there's, they're downloading like white papers, they're looking at guides, they're looking at heaps of resources. This is great to see sort of what's influencing that kind of along their journey. Particularly if you are sort of sending them, say, like nurturing emails or campaign kind of stuff that is sort of consistently engaging them. Back to letter-shaped attribution, there's also W-shaped attribution, which is kind of a zigzag like a W is. So 30% of the credit there goes to the first interaction, 30% goes to the contact creation interaction, and then 30% goes to the deal creation interactions. This one is specifically just for deal creation, really. The remaining 10% after that is split evenly between interactions between the first kind of touch at all and then the deal creation action. So this is looking at, I guess, more stuff. There's a lot more happening here, but it's specifically prioritizing first interaction, contact create, and then deal creation, rather than looking at, I guess, the more general engagements that they've had. So this is really great when you're looking at sort of how did contacts come through and then how did the deals be created, because it's giving you more of a sort of holistic view into that journey rather than just looking at how contacts were created or just looking at how deals were created. So this is one of the more specific ones, I suppose, but it can be helpful for that specific use case where you are trying to see how they're sort of going through your funnel from initial awareness, lead creation, and then hopefully sales being closed as well. And then finally, I think this one is fairly straightforward. The last model is linear attribution. And that is basically, it looks at every single engagement that contact had and then distributes credit equally amongst all of them. So it gives no consideration for what the first touch or last touch or most recent stuff was. It all just gets a pretty even rating. So this is probably not as helpful when you're looking at sort of a lot of attribution reporting. I don't personally use this all that much, but it is really good for just identifying what touch points contacts are engaging with, rather than looking at sort of what's actually causing contacts to be created or what's causing deals to be created. You're looking at just what are they touching, and that can be really helpful if you're not sure what kind of pages people are looking at or what asset types people are engaging with. It can be really helpful just to identify that so that you can see maybe where you should put more of your time or invest more resources in, because if you see that kind of along the whole journey, more people are looking at sort of a specific page or a specific video than you were expecting, that can be helpful so that you can sort of either build out more resources of that type or consider that, I guess, as you're kind of planning out or mapping out how your journey should work, so that you can, obviously if they're interested in that asset type, you should be committing to it, I suppose, and adding more of them or sort of improving it.
A more simpler sort of business that would fit perfectly, like less touch points and just give you a bit more of a overall. If you have a super complex, I assume that report would just be wild.
Yeah, it would end up quite...
It'd be wild.
It would be massive, and it would be difficult to see what's actually going to be like the important touch points. So I think it's good as like kind of a top-down overview of just like what's involved is really what I'm trying to say.
Might actually just end up being a U. Like if you've got like a really predefined entry and exit point, it'd just
well, with this, you won't kind of see what the entry and exit points are, I suppose. So you won't actually really get a sense of like where are they going first and then where are they kind of going from there. You can combine this with some of the further like filters and some of the, we haven't really talked about what data is available in the attribution reports yet, but you can use this as a way to kind of see like over time, where are they touching and what's happening. And that can be an interesting report to see as well.
All right, so what we're going to do now, as we've gone through all of the attribution types, is probably just jump into HubSpot and basically give some context into how this can kind of work. Again, I stress if there's any questions in the chat, or if there's any questions, throw them in the chat and also in the comments below. But Sophie's going to share her screen now and show us and step us through each of the reporting types, just to help give you guys some context.
Yeah, so I'll kind of show through a few different examples of how you could maybe build these reports and what kind of things and what kind of data really that you can get from them. So I'll start off with, I'll start off with maybe a contact attribution report. And here's one that I've already made. And it looks a bit different from some of the other reports that you might have seen that are attribution. This one's actually going along a date period. But what you can see here is the interaction date, which is each of these columns is sort of a day in time. And then you can see the interaction type. So you can kind of see when people are coming through and interacting with your website and what interaction type is happening, sort of when people are submitting forms, when leads are being created, when people are viewing pages. And in this instance, it doesn't look like there's any sort of major trends here. You can kind of see some dips where I'm pretty sure there are weekends, but this is kind of one of several ways that you can build a report like this. When you're doing it in the actual attribution reporting type, the advantage is that you can see kind of the actual, I guess, different types of interactions rather than just reporting on leads being created and then just reporting on when ads are being clicked. You can kind of see it all in the one report. There's lots of different dimensions you can use in these reports though. So for instance, you might want to just have a look at the type of asset that people are interacting with. You don't really care about the actual date. Maybe you want to see that from the last kind of full year, so 365 days. And you can see sort of how leads are being created or contacts are being created and what they're interacting with here. You can also see that in a few different ways. So asset type is literally sort of the type of the content they're interacting with. So that whether that's a landing page, website, it might be an ad, it might be a social post. But you can see one of the, or sort of the biggest column that we've got here is actually other lead creation. And that's often things like being created directly in the CRM by users, or by things like the email or like the inbox integration, if that's automatically creating contacts for you. So often for this type of report, you might actually want to filter this down so that you're not seeing that if it's not as relevant to you, if you're just trying to report on sort of marketing activities. Something that you can do at the top here is, if you go to filters, you can filter out certain sources, or filter out any of the other dimensions. So I might want to filter out the asset type or interaction type that is, I want to look at all of them, maybe except for, there's a lot more here than I thought to actually tick, other than integrations or other than other lead creation and that kind of thing, so that you can see more specifically just the marketing activity that's leading to contacts. And you can see that's changed our report here. It's kind of excluded that, and now you can see that it's sort of things like the landing page or website page. For this report, I am just looking at it on a linear basis, but you can also compare different models. So linear is giving equal attribution to each of those asset types, regardless of when it happened in the kind of journey. But if you wanted to compare how that looks to something like a J-shaped report, you can look at it all in the one report, and you can kind of see how your data is actually looking. So you might see some things like certain asset types are more commonly used kind of earlier in the process, whereas others are more commonly used later. Particularly for contact creation, often you'll see that like form submissions are generally your last touch, because it's where contacts are actually coming into your system. So for instance, J-shaped versus inverse J-shaped, you can see that it's kind of prioritized landing pages for J-shaped because it's giving more value to the later interactions in the funnel, whereas ads are weighted higher in the inverse J-shaped, because that means that more weighting is going towards the earlier stages in the funnel, which is often sort of someone sees an ad, they click on it, and then they go through to your website. So it is good to sort of have a look and see how these compare. And then you can have a look at some of the different dimensions and see how that kind of affects your data. So for instance, if we went with interaction source, you can see it's a lot more even, because this is sort of the original source for the contact. So whether they came through from social, direct traffic, or paid search, they're all sort of maybe going to similar locations there, regardless of where they are in the kind of customer journey. So for instance, you might want to have a look at kind of what activities are leading to deals and deal revenue, but also looking at what is leading to the deals that actually close, or kind of what activities are common between those. So in this instance, I'm looking at a J-shaped attribution model, but you could use a different model if that's kind of more relevant to your business. Here, a lot of the time, it is kind of the later stages that are more important in this particular instance. So if you're sort of a bigger company, you already have pretty good brand awareness, or you get a lot of referrals, you're not really doing as much awareness activity, you're more concerned with the deals that are actually coming through and the deals that are closing. So this is kind of a larger business that would want to look at that kind of thing and look at not only what deals are closing, but the amount of revenue that they're getting from deals, or sort of looking at what are the higher revenue bringing activities, I suppose. So in this instance, we're looking at different asset types. So we're looking at how marketing emails or landing pages or different things are impacting on the deals that come through. But then we're also wanting to break this down further. So what I've done here is I've selected asset type, but then we're also looking at deal stage. So you can see that the orange stage is closed lost, and then the blue stage is closed won. So what you can do here is see, okay, there's a lot of activity. It was actually split pretty evenly, which is a bit of a surprise, but basically you can see here like what activities are leading to deals actually being closed, or sort of what do they have in common more accurately. And that can be a great way to see, you might be getting a lot of leads coming through from a certain asset type, but then when you look at this report, that asset type actually isn't getting a lot of deals actually close. And in that way, you might be able to tell that the leads you're getting from that particular source might not be the best leads for your business, or maybe there needs to be sort of more education for the contacts that come through from that source. So it can be a great way to kind of identify what's happening later in your funnel. And when you're using that in combination with sort of earlier reporting, you can see it's not just volume, it's also looking at how much is closing and how much revenue is actually coming through from those sources. And that's one of the main benefits, I think, of the attribution reporting, is that it can combine all of that and kind of identify some of that information that you may not have expected to see. The other kind of things that you can look at here, if you are looking at revenue reporting, is, again, you can see kind of the same dimensions regardless of what type of report you're looking at for the most part. And you might be interested in the specific URL that people are interacting with, so what actual pages are they clicking on, or the actual title of the content that they're clicking on as well. You can see the name of the email or the name of the landing page. So if you did want to break that down, and I might use a different report to do that. So in this instance, I'll just get rid of a couple of these attribution models. You can only use one attribution model if you're using multiple dimensions. But here we'll say, we want to look at the asset type, which is things like website page or landing page, but then you actually want to know which website page or which landing page they're looking at. And for that, you can go down to asset title, and then you can break that down by asset type, actually. So there is a lot of information here. I might kind of restrict this to just the last 30 days. And now you can see kind of what of your content or what of your assets are they actually looking at. So in this case, the contact us page is pretty high. So you can see what actual content are people engaging with, and how is that impacting kind of the sales process. The asset type breakdown here is really just coloring it by different asset types. So you can see like what's a website page versus a landing page versus a blog page. And if I go to sort of a larger date range, you can see there are some blog posts kind of sneaking in here in the yellow.
So if you're wanting to see which contacts come from which blogs, what would you be looking at here?
So you could do that with a really similar report to this, looking at kind of asset title or asset type. You could go into the filters and filter by asset type being blog post, but an easier way to do that, where you can still see all of your data but just quickly filter it, is if you click on any of these, you're basically excluding them from the report. So here you're just seeing your blog posts and kind of the most popular blog posts. And that's an easy way if you've already got an existing report, you don't want to create a new one. The difference is it's still showing kind of the blank spaces where you would have other information. So if you wanted to and you did want to filter, you could go to, again, asset type, and I might just clear all of these. You can keep just blog post, and that will show you a report of all of your blog posts and how they've impacted contact create, but it's going to take away everything else. So if you wanted to build just a report for blogs, that's how I would do it. Otherwise, I would use the main report and just filter it down. But you can see you've got sort of more information here about the actual number of contacts that were created, and then average number of interactions as well to create a contact.
So I think, I guess just to recap a little bit, just talking about attribution reporting, the model types and the different reporting types inside. Often if somebody's starting out for the first time and getting stuck into this, because it can be overwhelming, what are a couple of tips that you'd probably give them just to sort of get started?
Yep. I think probably my first tip would be just to start simple. Go in there with sort of an idea of what you want to report on. Don't get distracted by all of the possible options, because there's so many options. But go in with an idea of what question that you're trying to answer. Go in there with why are you creating this report? What question do you have? And then that's going to cut down on the amount that you have to kind of look at in the report builder. So if you're looking at how people first heard about your business, or if you're looking at like what pages they interact with on your business, on your website, you can ignore a lot of the options in that report, and it really makes it a lot easier to kind of narrow your focus and just look at what's important to that question or whatever you're trying to answer. So starting simple, having a question is really going to help you kind of avoid that data overload. It can help if you already have an idea of sort of what your business's funnel looks like, or kind of what stages a customer goes through. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Like, you can use these reports to get that understanding and to have a better idea of where contacts go and how they're coming through. But if you already have a rough idea of at least how you think that funnel should progress, that'll help you align those reports to those stages a bit better. So if you already know that there's a lot of sort of early funnel education that contacts are doing, and they're looking at certain pages on your website or they're looking at certain resources, then that will help you sort of narrow your focus again to just that sort of thing, so that you can look at that more specifically and align it to what you're looking at there. I wouldn't just do that. Like, it is helpful to see what else they're interacting with, but those would probably be my first tips. I also think probably just the best way to learn any of this is just to go in there and to mess around with it. Like, there's not really any reason you can't just play with the settings, try all the different data types. If you don't already have a question you're trying to answer or you're just trying to learn about this and see how it goes, then just keep experimenting with it. Try different models, compare the different models, save those, look at them sort of over time. And then you can kind of continuously update those, either create new reports or edit the existing reports as you kind of learn more about how it works and get a better sense. So you might build a few reports at first, just playing around with the settings, trying and comparing different attribution models. And then later down the track, you figure out, okay, I actually want to filter out some of this data and I just want to look at certain contact types. You might want to look at just a certain persona, for instance. So you can play around with all of that and really just see what the data looks like, get a sense of, what numbers come from what, is a really great way to get better at reporting and to have a better idea of how to explain that to people. Because a lot of the time you're building these reports to explain it to, an accounting team or a sales manager or something like that. So playing with it so that you actually understand what this data means is massive, really big help. And then this kind of ties back to having a question that you're trying to answer. But with any reporting, not just attribution reporting, I think it's really important to understand what kind of story that report is telling. Because it's not just data points. Even if you're looking at an individual customer journey and you're seeing numbers on, like, they viewed this page or they viewed this form, it's not just numbers. That's a person who visited your website, they were interested in something, and then they clicked over here, and then they clicked over here, and then they submitted a form. There's a story that you can tell with any report and with any data, and that makes it a lot easier to share that with kind of your wider team or the wider business to say, if you show them just a report and you say, like, these are the numbers, this one has higher numbers than this one, which means it's good. There's not a lot, no one's going to get anything from that. But if you say, this one we're getting a lot early in the funnel, which actually means that, people are going here first when they visit our website. And then we've noticed that actually they're going to this page because they're really interested in this feature or this service that your business provides. It'll give it a lot more context. It'll make it a lot more understandable for the wider business. So that's a tip, not just for attribution reporting, but for any reporting that you're doing, is to understand how to tell that story and how to actually share that with other people. Because data is useless if people don't understand it.
Awesome. I think that wraps up the whole conversation around attribution reporting. If there's anything you want to add.
There is not.
No.
I think that's everything I can say about attribution reporting without making it a very, very long video.
Yeah, no. Well, as I mentioned, there's if you want to rewatch the recording, we'll send a link out to this, and then the chapters will be at the bottom, so you can easily sort of scrub through to find out specific parts as well. And I think that if you are getting started and you don't have the specific level, reach out to us at weare@mbh.co. If you don't have that level, and we can have a chat to HubSpot and get a trial activated for you. And then roughly, I think they give you about 2 weeks, and you can kind of play around with it and sort of go from there. But by and large, everybody on a pro, and we think starter, probably.
I think it's pro marketing.
Oh yeah. So for everyone on pro marketing, you'll get your contacts attribution, and then for the deal and the revenue, that'll be marketing enterprise. So just a bit of a caveat there. Any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us because we're always here to help out. Well, that wraps up our very first January 2025 hug. Diving into attribution reporting. Thanks, Soph, for coming through and stepping through it all. I've learned a little bit of something about it, which is great. But I think the good thing about it is that we've sort of taken away the one thing I've taken away is go in with a bit of a purpose and what are you trying to solve, or what question are you trying to get answered? I think that's the big takeaway for that, because it can get fairly overwhelming. On the screen right now is our next hug, and it's going to have the date, the topic, and the time. We have a meeting this afternoon to talk about this. So on the screen right now, we'll have the next hug. So make sure you tune in. The link for that hug is in the description below as well. So It is a free, our HubSpot user groups are free to attend, so feel free to sign up. Once you've signed up, we'll send you an email when the next one comes as well. And also, if you'd like the recording, you don't have to attend the live ones, just click attend and we'll make sure we'll get that recording out to you as well. But that's it from me. Thanks, Soph, for going through that.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for everybody for watching, and we will see you guys in a month's time to talk about that topic there. Thank you guys. Have a great day.